I got to say, this is probably one of the better ads I've seen in the past, I'll say the past 12 hours. Here we go. Ron Paul releasing an ad about Newt Gingrich. Take a quick listen. Oh, there we
There's
go.
a real question of policy and a real question of values and a real question of seriousness. The real question of policy.
We don't always see eye to eye, do we, Newt?
No, but we do agree our country must take action to address climate change.
Newt Gingrich has been on both sides of a long list of issues, sometimes in the same week.
Okay, so there you go. That's just a portion of the about 2-minute, 15-second ad that's out there. Joining us on the line now to discuss that, so much more, Congressman Ron Paul. Congressman, how you doing?
Doing fine, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Oh, not a problem, sir. And it's interesting that ad that your campaign released is focused on Newt Gingrich and some of the inconsistencies in his campaign. How would you follow up that ad when and saying this is not the guy?
Well, I haven't thought that far along, but
okay.
People have asked those questions. What will the sequel be, to this? But, I think it's powerful because I think this is what people are so disgusted with is not getting straight answers from politicians and the flip-flopping, and they change from one year to the next and saying one thing, they get elected and they never do it. That's what I hear, and I hear that they complain both about Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and that seems to be the big focus. And right now, in a campaign field that's extremely crowded, and we see different polling every single week. There's a new front runner. It looks like Newt Gingrich is actually doing extraordinarily well. You're holding pretty consistently in second or third. What, sir, do you think would be the ticket for you to get ahead in this race?
Well, I think keep doing what we're doing and progressing, and the other ones, as you say, they get to the top and then they get knocked down. Actually, Romney is not doing quite as well as he had been, and if Gingrich follows the pattern of others, he'll pop up and pop down. It really raises questions. I'm sure the polls are accurate for the moment, but isn't it amazing how quickly the moment changes? The only thing I'm pleased with is that our numbers, don't go down. They don't go up as fast as the others, but there's a steady increase. So I think it's a solid base, and I think that's what we have to continue to do. And then wait and see when people figure out what the others are doing. They might lose their enthusiasm for it.
Well, now, Congressman, now that we got the politics out of the way, I've been waiting to ask you this all week. I want to get into the issue of what the Federal Reserve reportedly did in lending during the financial crisis, over $7 trillion with the T dollars. Is that right? $7 trillion did during the financial crisis, and now is apparently printing and lending more money to European banks. What's happening with this, and how come we don't know anything about it until it's already happened?
We got more information, and they identified the $7 trillion, but actually there are figures that are much larger than that over 08 and 09. I think the $7 trillion was in a shorter period of time when they were able to identify, but over those year and a half or so, it was like closer to 15 or 16 trillion. But the amazing thing there that even impressed me was that 5 trillion went overseas, to the banks. Our banks had, investments in and were part owners. So there was a lot of bailing out going on then. But we're back at it again. In many ways, this is a worldwide QE, a quantitative easing concerted effort, because I think they're sort of in panic mode because they can't handle this debt. And they won't admit how serious it is, and they won't liquidate that, so somebody has to get stuck with it. But I see the American people getting stuck with this because this is a dollar rescue. The dollar is the reserve currency. It's amazing, the dollar holds up as well as it does. But even yesterday with this effort, the dollar did drop, and it doesn't bode well for the American people and the value of the dollar and inflation. But this is to bail out the banks. The banks own so much of that sovereign debt. Yeah. And if it isn't taken care of, then some of these credit default swaps will kick in, which I think would be the big event, and they have to prevent that and protect the banks. But in order to do that, they have to prop up that debt at the expense of the American people. So it's more of the same, but I think it's going to be much bigger than it was even in 08 and 09.
And it seems that we're propping up and blowing up, as to use the metaphor, the bubbles, and they just keep getting bigger and bigger. And in this case, it looks like we may see yet another bubble. A lot of economists at this point looking and saying, well, a double-dip recession could be precipitated by the fact that you have a European debt crisis. You have the fact that money is really expensive to get. Companies can't run without having a credit card, without having some kind of credit, and that could potentially spread here. If you were president of the United States tomorrow, what would you do in this case?
Well, what I would do is not bail out anybody through any congressional appropriation, which is a significant amount, but that's not the big one. You have to rein in the Fed. You have to get Congress to pass something to say that the Fed can't do this without congressional approval. They're many-fold bigger than the Congress when it comes to spending money, so this can't be allowed. But that means we'd have to adopt a policy of allowing the debt to be liquidated. The people, Greece would have to declare bankruptcy, and the banks that are holding that debt, it's an ugly situation, but the choice is letting the banks suffer the consequence or putting all the penalty on the American people. So I would do my very best to stop that and prevent them from doing this. But unfortunately, right now, there's a strong sentiment in the establishment, Republicans and Democrats, oh, no, you can't let that happen. If we don't, we're going to have a depression. But I don't worry about a double dip. I worry about a continuation of the deterioration of this whole system. Yeah. Although the numbers say that we're not technically in a recession, but how about the people who are still unemployed? I mean, it's very depressing for them because they're not getting the job. So it's not a very good situation.
No, it seems extraordinarily dangerous at this point. I want to get into a little bit of a local issue here, Congressman. It's a statewide issue, but it also has some national implications, and that's right to work. In the state of New Hampshire, there was a veto override vote yesterday in order to allow non-union members working in union shops to basically be exempt from paying dues. The governor said, no, you have to pay dues. You have to make sure that you pay into this system, and that's pretty much where the legislature kept it. The veto was not overridden. What do you think about right to work in general in states, and would it be good for the state of New Hampshire to become the first northeastern state to be a right to work state?
Oh, obviously so. I mean, if you believe in a free society and free markets, people should be able to do things voluntarily. So nobody should be coerced into a contract. This is an issue of contract. But here we're saying we have to give special privileges to collective bargaining and put more pressure on the businessman. So business people can't force people to work for them, but they shouldn't be forced to hire people either. But there should never be a prohibition against organizing and collective bargaining. People should be able to get together and talk and try to, get their best interest served. But that doesn't mean they can have the clout of the law. And when they force people to pay dues and they're forcing these contracts, this is a major source of unemployment. And if you look at the states that have been more extreme, in the industrial states, in the Midwest, that's where all the jobs have gone, and they've been put out of business. Yeah. And it pushes so many jobs overseas. So it pushes labor costs higher than they should be. And it's great when they're getting the money, but what good are high labor costs if you don't have a job?
Yeah.
So it's temporarily beneficial, and they think it's a salvation, and they're sticking it to the businessman. But when you have a contraction, you have a correction. Profits have to go down, salaries have to go down, and labor costs have to go down. They have to adjust. But artificially keeping them high is exactly what they did in the Depression and why the Depression lasted so long.
And Congressman, one last question. I want to ask you about something that is working its way through the Congress right now, and that's this payroll tax cut the president continues to talk about. Now, he's gone out in the campaign trail and pretended to be a guy who's in favor of cutting taxes, which I find astonishing. But he's out there on his campaign stops now talking about this, and he's making it seem as if the GOP would be against this payroll tax cut. And if that's true, can you tell us why?
Well, there's a lot of demagoguing going on with that because some Republicans weren't in favor of them. Some of them are. I'm for any tax cut you can get. Then they come up with this idea, well, you got to pay for it. Well, in theory, you don't have to pay for tax cuts. It's your money. You should be able to keep it any way you can. But if they did, why don't they cut some money from some useless foreign aid program or someplace like that? That's where I would cut the money so that you don't put that tax back on. But I think both sides are demagoguing this issue, and the president thinks he's going to, embarrass the Republicans by arguing the case for lower taxes. But it is an uncomfortable position for a Republican to argue, no, we need to put that tax back on. At the same time, they don't want to put the tax back on the Bush taxes, the exemptions that Bush gave too.
Congressman Ron Paul, we appreciate the time. Doctor and presidential candidate as well. You have a whole bunch of titles there, sir. Thank you so much.